Hello, I'm Josh.
I'm Josh.
And I'm not Josh, but together we are
Jamieing around in air. Yes. so it's actually kind of a hard thing to say, jamieing around, but no, that's great. Yes, by the intro, I'm sure you figured out that something's different. And we have our very first guest on Joshing Around in Air. We have Jamie. So welcome. Great to see you, mate. Thanks for coming by.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me on.
Mate, 100%. I think we've been chatting about this for a little while, haven't we? And it's nice. I think we mentioned it, the last Bad Moon. When was that? Back in January? February?
I think it was February, March time, I think, because I ran the event, I think, and you guys did pretty well, I think. It was joint first and third or something like that along the way. So,
exactly.
Yes.
Both on the podium. Come on.
I was just happy to beat Toby. Like that's pretty much my proudest Conquest moment to date.
Oh man. Speaking of which, you've had a bit of success yourself, Jamie. So second place at LGT and first at last year's UK Game Expo. I think that officially makes you the most decorated Conquest player in the room by some considerable margin. So yeah.
And the hot tip to be top of the UK leaderboard by Just Roll Ones. There was an episode that ran a couple of months ago, and they said they're not allowed to name themselves as potential leaders, and the name they came up with was you. I don't know if you listened to that episode.
Oh, did they? No, I relative anonymity, and it doesn't seem to be working out for me. But I'm flattered. I've been entirely set up for success in the wrong ways.
Yeah. Oh man, but no, it's good. So Jamie, I figured we'd ask you a little bit about yourself. Yeah, what was kind of your first experience wargaming?
I think like a lot of us, got in through Games Workshop. I've been playing wargames for about 20 years now. I got in through the Lord of the Rings game when the films were coming out. Had no idea how to play, but grew up near Nottingham, so I have good memories of no idea what the rules are, pushing like ring raids and models up Helm's Deep.
Nice.
Branched across into 40k, into fantasy. Kept through till about 10 years ago at university, and then I decided to break out the Games Workshop sphere. Anyone listening here probably has already done so, but if you haven't, highly recommend it. It's worth trying other things. I got big into War Machine, so I played War Machine for the best part of the decade, including going to the WTC, which was fantastic. And then just over a year ago, I thought I wanted something different. Found Conquest online through some articles, really liked the look of the game. And bought into Orcs and Dinosaurs. Met you early on, Sam. I think you ran one of my first early games. I think we played early on as well against your Nords, Josh. But,
yes, I remember that.
Not working out why these Valkyries kept getting back up. Just got hooked on it. And been playing just over a year now. And it's an absolutely cracking game. Cannot recommend enough. And everyone I've demoed the game to has absolutely loved it. It feels such a great game to play. There's something about it. I don't know what it is, but people really resonate with it, I think.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess for us, we were kind of in a slightly unique situation where we jumped in straight onto the Conquest train pretty much after a few games of Gorka Morka. But I've kind of, I don't know, I feel like I've just been having a great time with Conquest, and that is probably because it's a great game. You mentioned War Machine. I feel like a lot of Conquest players seem to have come from War Machine, because I know Aaron from Just Roll One mentions it. I know Mass mentions it a lot on Bonk Table. But yeah, there seems to be a bit of a correlation between War Machine players and Conquest. What was that sort of about? Was that, I guess, people didn't like War Machine or the way it was going or something like that?
I mean, I'll try and keep vaguely on topic here because we're interested in Conquest, not War Machine. And what I won't talk badly about is War Machine as a game system or Privateer Press as a company. It's not the place for that. War Machine, I think, about late 2000s, early 2010s was really on the rise as the big competition for Games Workshop events with hundreds of people coming out, and had a very, very tight rule system, really competitive game system, and it was something you could really get into on a sort of strategic level. So it drew in people who wanted to play competitively, but with an interest of building the skill of competitive play rather than net listing and winning. And I think one of the things that translates across Real to Conquest is you can't just go on to the Adepticon lists or from whatever, a big event, copy and paste that and suddenly go and win an event. The game is complex. It's a lot of back and forth and interactions with your opponent and the scenarios and everything else. And I think all of us here resonate with that. You can really get a satisfactory skill out of this by learning the game, learning the rhythms and the back and forth. I think that's what draws War Machine players into Conquest as well. Is it scratches that same kind of itch of rewarding you for putting the time and thought into not just what's the best unit, copy and paste it 6 times, but how am I going to layer up my strategies and have a great game with an opponent.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because I think that was my kind of understanding of it, was that War Machine was similar in the kind of the skill level required to play was more important than kind of having like a list that was like solved or whatever, right? So I think, it seems like each year we see something very different at various different tournaments, and it's not like everything's all the same, unless of course you played 100 Kingdoms at Adepticon where you just ran Ashen Dawn. But I think, I think you're right. It seems to be a really unique game in that sense. I as I'm sure you know, is a tradition on our podcast. We like to have some listener questions, which at one point were, questionable whether they came from real sources or indeed AI generation. And I will not comment on that for legal reasons. But but yeah, we do have a great question. So it is, hey Josh, and not Josh, but not the second Josh. He knows what he did. I assume that's you, not me.
I think it's left ambiguous deliberately.
Yeah. I think once you know who it's from, I feel like you might know the answer to that. If you had to add a fluffy rule to the faction you play, what rule would you add? So that's from Scott. Do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Amazing.
I feel like the Spires is really desperate for fluffy rules because there's far too much in the game that is, is maths orientated and is strategic and tactical, and the Spires just are begging to be played as if you're a madman.
Yes. Okay.
So on our WhatsApp group today, actually, there was this investigation into the Desolation drones and as to whether they could be worked into 12 catabolic nodes, and it turns out only 4, which is a little bit disappointing. But the idea that you could stick a catabolic node in every single unit that you're using and just that my game plan is explode. that's a very sort of true to Spires, and so I feel like there ought to be, if we were to introduce a fluffy rule, some level of reward for insanity. It should be possible to run a list that is only Force-grown drones, and that to be able to win a scenario.
Right. Okay. Sure.
It's like a fluffy rule, though. If it's also to win scenarios,
yes,
though,
fair enough.
Because you're having both ends of the spectrum there. You want both a fluffy rule and one that's a winning rule.
So it should. I've started. We were talking about this the other day. I've started replaying the original Fallout series because of the new Prime series. Kind of tricked me back into it. And there are perks that you can pick up as you level up in the Fallout game. A uniquely ability to interact with people in speech or something like this. And some of the perks have no impact on gameplay whatsoever. It's just when you kill somebody, it's going to produce more gore than normal, and you always choose that one. That's the sort of thing that I think would work well in Spires.
I don't know if I've understood the concept of a fluffy rule right, but I want a rule for let's go Old Dominion, where if you only run Legionnaires, their stat line changes. So I don't know, if your army consists only of legionnaires, they all have 1 extra attack and 1 extra wound, maybe 1 extra defense. I don't know, but something like that. And so then you've got this like dumb list you could run where you just run only legionnaires, but they get like a slight buff to try and make it semi-competitive.
Reward you for being memey.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, you build like a dumb list and you get a small bonus that really doesn't make up for your list.
I mean, there's a very obvious one for Wadron, isn't it? Which is you look at orcs riding dinosaurs and take out the first part. So something that lets you take a warlord apex predator or a tonsil, and the warband is entirely made up of unmounted Triceratops Thunder, well, not Thunder Riders, just Thunder.
Sure.
Not Raptor Riders, Raptor. So you have to play the models without any of the crew riding on top of them or anything like that. You just have this sort of Jurassic Park gone wrong moment of a swarm of dinosaurs just running across.
Yeah, you don't get to decide who they attack. You just have to roll a dice and they randomly attack someone.
Everything auto fails bloodthirst. It cannot see zones.
Yes.
Yes.
But if any dinosaurs get off the other end of the board, you know, it's what was there in the Jurassic Park 2? Was that where they got to New York? I can't remember now, but yeah, that's my fluffy one.
Spoiler
All dinosaurs,
alert.
no orcs.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry, spoiler alert. For Jurassic Park.
I think the way that you got what you suggested there is way better than what I was thinking you were going to say, which was that you were going to take the orcs riding dinosaurs and reverse it.
That's what I thought as well.
That's yeah.
Just an apex predator riding on top of like a brave's shoulders.
That poor orc who's trying to carry a T-Rex into battle.
Oh man. New faction, Parabellum? Question mark. Oh man. Yeah, that's great. I think for me, I loved when we played Gorka Morka. One of the rules I loved was that, I mean, I hate it because it always happens to me because I'm using like modern scale Warhammer 40k models, and the actual normal ones are like the ones from Gorka Morka are like these little guys you can fit onto the back of a truck. But basically, like if an orc falls off of a truck while you're moving it in the game, it happens in game as well. So like if the model falls off of the truck, it takes like a wound or something like that, right? I'm just thinking like a rule that basically is like game wide, and it basically rewards you for magnetizing your models. So if like you're moving a massive brick of Foursquare drones and one of them like falls over, it's like it's dead. It just died.
Beware if you're running Strix.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Nah, that's fine. You got regen 4. Don't worry about it. Jamie, it's great to have you here. I know we talked a little bit before about something that you had on your mind about Conquest. And that was something that I'd not really considered before. I think perhaps because I don't know necessarily what the terms themselves mean, but I think you basically proposed to me the idea that Conquest is actually a skirmish game and not a mass battle game. I think I was just chatting to Josh before. I feel like my understanding of what a skirmish game is like, oh, it's just less models. But I guess it's probably more to do with the actual mechanics of the game, right? So yeah, just wondered what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, I mean, it's like for what it's worth, I don't necessarily stand by this, but I think it's a fun little thought experiment just to see how far it goes. So
no, we're pushing you into this corner, Jamie.
To contextualize, this comes towards the start of the year. I branched out into Kill Team and played. I actually went to not Warhammer World and played an event there. Got absolutely spanked. I think it was Norton 4 at one point and wanted to throw all my toys in the bin, but. I found there's a lot more similarities between a game on a 30 by 22 board between 6 Space Marines versus 9 Guardsmen or whatever it was, and Conquest.
Right.
And in anticipation of this question, I propose you 3 reasons why Conquest is actually a skirmish game pretending to be a rank and flank game.
Yes. I'm just expecting you to roll out the like overhead projector now.
Yes.
And I think the core of it is, in a line, I think Conquest behaves like a skirmish game when you actually break it down. The first one is, like you said, models. If you go back to sort of, the almost one of the OG kind of fantasy games. Well, in fantasy, every individual model is a single model, and as a model dies, you take it off. And in fact, if you guys played Conquest V1, didn't you? When you lost a wound, correct me if I'm wrong, but you removed the model from the stand?
Yes.
Well, it wasn't necessarily just one wound. So there were some trolls. Oh my gosh, I hated it so much. Where each model was 2 wounds, and so a stand would be 8. It was either 4 or 8, some multiple of 4. So it was models removed.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that's interesting about comparing, say, particularly with the Old World being out now, you compare between the Old World and Conquest, is Old World has a lot more individual models and a lot more individual units on their own. You'll get 30 points of warhounds running around doing screening. You'll get a random artillery piece in the corner. You'll get a wizard on his own casting spells at the back. So you'll end up with maybe 15 to 20 individual units that doing their own thing, have individual models, and can break off characters and run around and do their own things. Whereas because you're more or less locked into your characters are in the regiments, they're basically upgrades at function level, and you're only going to have between 6 and 12 regiments, depending how big you've gone, depending on characters. And they're complicated models, but if you think of each regiment as an individual model with just a lot of rules and numbers, then you start to see that similarity that actually you think of it less of you're playing with, 50 stands of models, which you spent ages painting. You're actually playing with 6 blocks and you're trying to move against your opponent's 8 blocks, for example. So that's case 1, I guess.
Right, okay.
Don't know what you guys think of that as a starter for 10, but...
Yeah,
Gosh, I'm already convinced. I'm waiting for you.
I'm waving the Conquest as a skirmish game banner already. I mean, this is...
I don't play enough other war games to know this, but one thing I was saying to Josh earlier is I've seen Conquest, you can fully wipe your opponent's army and still lose the game because it's obviously more about the objectives and stuff that you're doing. Are there many other battle war games where your whole army can get wiped and you can still win?
Not many, but generally speaking, there are some. Again, for comparison, Warhammer Fantasy has always been about kill points. It's been what you score, what you kill. There's been very little sort of controlling zones and circles and things like that. Kill Team is all about scoring zones and points though as well, and you can be tabled but still win. It's rare, but it can happen.
Sure.
War Machine was weird because you had multiple win conditions. Your warlord, your leader in War Machine, your warcaster. If the opponent killed your warcaster, you lost. Flat out, it was like taking the king in chess. Oh. So it created this funny rubber band effect where someone would kill a load of stuff, get a load of scenario points, and generally put the other person in positions like, right, I'm going to go and try and kill your leader and maybe take a 10-20% assassination run. But sometimes it comes off. You get some really exciting moments as someone's trying to work out some weird creative angles to kill your leader. So yeah, it does happen. But I think it's unusual. Generally speaking, if you've killed everything in the opponent's army, you've probably won.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think the way you've just explained the idea effectively that whether it's each unit or each stand is effectively acting as a single model. It's got lots of different bits on it, but that's basically what it is, because we're not removing models anymore, and so it is the stand that is taken away. I'm now intrigued as to when they did the change and started scoring wounds per stand rather than per model, would it have been a more true to sort of traditional idea of what a rank and flank game looks like if they had effectively multiplied it by 10? So instead of it being 4 wounds per stand, it's 40 and everything times by 10. And then that gives you a lot more flexibility over, okay, well, it's 10 wounds per individual unit, and therefore a force-grown drone actually is going to be 8 per unit, and a troll is going to be 16 per unit, which keeps that same balance in there, but gives a lot more flexibility over sort of how you go about that.
Yeah. I mean, you guys saw the transition from 1 to 2, so you're in a far better place to comment than I am on it. But I think there's something in there. Yeah, it sort of closes back to that old idea, because Conquest is very much based in Warhammer Fantasy and its core elements. There's a lot of very similar mechanics that have transferred across, so you can see the heritage there. But yeah, that's I think it's the first case on from there. It's felt similar in that sense to when I was playing Kill Team with 6 Space Marines versus my LGT list, which had 6 regiments.
Yes.
When you look at it that way, as actually, okay, there is a similar, move this in, get the value out of this one thing, and I have 6 things to get value out of. Yeah.
So my initial reaction to that was, oh, but you lose effectiveness as your regiment gets smaller. But then I realised in a lot of other war games, you have like brackets or whatever, where like if you've lost a certain amount of wounds, you get less effective. So I was like, actually, I guess I kind of just answered my own question. But but yeah, it is interesting to me that actually that dynamic of looking at a regiment as basically a big model. Do you find that would be like something that's helpful in strategy or anything like that? Or is it more just kind of like an observation?
I pitched an observation, but maybe there is something in that there. Maybe as you're thinking about how you're using your units and what they're doing, if you probably the best thing is it lowers the emotional investment. We've all had our super Death Star with our custom-based character at the head of it, with 200 blocks of spy drones if you're Dave or whatever, or whatever your prize unit is, and it's gotten charged and wiped out by something that is, you put them all back in the box. Maybe if you think that was just one unit, maybe just save some of the emotional damage that comes from it.
It's fine. It was just a Space Marine. It's okay.
Yeah. So that was the first one. The second one is actually something that's again you see a lot in skirmish games. It's also an activation. So
yes,
I don't mind picking on Games Workshop because they're the biggest kid in the room. Full army activation, so I go with all my stuff, then you go with yours. Very much exists in 40k in fantasy. Lord of the Rings to an extent had it. They had sort of a phased back and forth, but I do all my stuff, then you go with all your stuff. And skirmish games, small scale things like Kill Team, Warcry, to an extent, I think. And I don't think Infinity does. Infinity does something different, where you go back and forth with your opponent, and that tends to work because you have, again, these small number of models. So if you've only got 6 models, you can go back and forward and trade back and forward, and you lose less momentum and less impact. Yeah. Whereas 40k fantasy, the game is designed around you building your army together, things working in cohesion. This one applies marker light, so you shoot it better. This wizard's going to cast an anti-armor spell, so you can then hit it with your cavalry. You bring your army together synergistically. And for interest in professional wargaming done by the military, there is this concept of still having turns, and your forces do move together as one. So the origin of our wargaming, the fun casual one with wizards and dinosaurs and magic zombie Byzantines, comes from a place where it was my whole army goes, then your army goes.
Sorry, Magic Zombie Byzantines is now how I always refer to Old Millionaires.
I'm going to start referring to them as MZBs.
Yes.
Not OD, MZB.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
No, that was it. For alternate activation, it's something you've seen a lot in skirmish games, and I think very wisely, Parabellum taking that on. It creates a lot of interest. It's less of sitting there for half an hour watching your opponent do all their things. You're always going back and forth. And interestingly, with the rumors and the bits talking about Age of Sigmar 4, even though it is an I go, you go system, they're trying to add more and more things that let you interrupt your opponent's turn. Even Horse Heresy has it with reactions. You've now got commands that let you potentially even charge your opponent in their turn in Age of Sigmar 4 now. So this idea of being able to interact with your opponent whilst they're also moving the whole army is creeping in everywhere. So, so that's my second offer of why it's a skirmish game. It's alternate activation. It's a very popular skirmish mechanism.
Right.
And I haven't really seen it replicated in other mass battle games yet.
Yes, I think that's not that I know many, but yeah, I feel like I haven't seen too much of that. I've always found it interesting because alternate activation has just seemed to me to be the logical way to do sort of wargaming and things. But I guess when you talked about the synergies that you have in an army in games where it's, I go, you go, that makes a lot of sense. And it also makes me realise kind of why tempo is so important in Conquest in terms of like, right, I can activate this regiment or this character and give this buff to this regiment, but unless I can then immediately act that regiment, I'm now just completely telegraphed what I'm going to do to my opponent. And so it seems that there's like a unique, I guess not unique because there are other alternate activation games out there, but like, a unique situation in which where, you kind of have to really make it worth it that you want to like go and do something like that, right?
Yeah, I guess that feeds back into your first point of like, that's why we treat it like separate units, because often you buff the unit the character's in, and at least now with the new rules, that unit then acts and does its own thing. So it's quite, apart from you, Sam, you love to like, with your spires, change everything everywhere. But
they shuffle my deck halfway through the turn.
Yeah. But yeah, the rest of us, it's like, this unit acts, they buff themselves, then they go do something, and then it's the next unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it leads on to the final point, though, which is, this is pretty much uniquely to Conquest, which is no deployment. It is, right. I think you could argue drop fleet commander or drop zone commander, where it's the 10mm game where you're fighting in a city and you have, everyone's in airships, aliens and things, and you drop off like 10mm guys who run to buildings. But because you don't deploy your army at the start and your army doesn't begin as a cohesive block, there's actually less opportunity to build synergies. I think you guys were talking on one of your previous casts recently about do you come into the game with any plans of how you're going to deploy and lay out? And I think the answer is actually not that much, because you've got to react to what's happening, where you need to apply those reinforcements, and it's the dynamism.
Right.
A mass battle game, you're going to be saying, right, I'm going to have this character who's applying this my leadership aura to everyone within this range, and they're going to be next to this, and then I'm going to have this line in the way of my artillery on this hill, and you set up your army as a whole cohesive piece, because the whole army's going to act together. It's all going to go at the same time. It's all going to achieve what it wants by overlapping with each other. That's the appeal of a mass game. Your army does everything at the same time. Conquest, you don't get that. You don't have your entire army gloriously charged like the Battle of the Rohirrim and Pelennor Fields and sweep away the pikemen. You don't get that same effect.
No.
And I think it's less so why it's a skirmish game, but why it doesn't behave like a mass battle a mass battle game, because your army doesn't actually activate as a mass group. It acts one by one. Thus concludes my argument of why we're actually playing a skirmish game.
That is a fantastically laid out argument. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Please send any disagreements and criticism into the Gmail.
Yeah. We'll just have to set up an automatic forwarding to your email.
Didn't think this through, did I?
I'd like to set up camp on the alternate side for a moment.
Go on.
Perhaps just to play devil's advocate and remain true to the cause. That's the point that you're ultimately making with most of what you said there is that in a mass battle game, what you're thinking about is synergy across the entire army, whereas as a skirmish game, it's treating things as individual units. So like the unit itself is effectively as a model. And maybe this is particularly true for Spires players, I don't know, but I feel like if I don't know the overall list that I'm running, or if I've created a list which isn't designed in order to work with everything else on the list, I'm going to lose. And my easy example for that is in the first LGT that we went to, the first game I played against was somebody where I think it was his first or second game he'd ever played of Conquest. He went to LGT and I absolutely hammered him. And it was basically because as he was drawing his cards, he wasn't entirely sure how things were meant to operate with each other. And in fact, Josh, when you and I played a few months ago, I remember running a Biomancer, Ferromancer list for the first time in a while, and I didn't do very well at all. And it was because I wasn't playing them in the way they need to be played with each other. And so actually, if you play Conquest as if I've just got 6 very good complex models, I expect you're going to lose most games. Whereas if you have come up with 6 good models which interact with each other in really intelligent ways, so that when one acts, you're actually preparing the next one to go and do its thing that it's good at, which is going to set up the third for the thing that it's good at, And that's probably what differentiates what we were saying right at the beginning about the sort of skill attribute that comes into the game, where it's not just about the quality of the units, it's about the sort of player that is understanding how they work together as well.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying. I think the part you said at the start, which I think is the Spires, I think really epitomise that. I think of all the factions we've got, in terms of what one unit does affecting another regiment in a friendly way, I think the Spires probably have the most of that. For Wadron, it is sequencing, it's just timing, but it's not. One unit doesn't specifically buff the other. It's just that you've just got to get the cue right for the song list. Same for Sorcerer Kings. You've got to hit the timing for the rituals, but it's not specifically this unit is making the X unit is making Y unit good.
Yeah.
But I think Spires have particularly got that down, where you are, you're dropping stats off one unit to buff another, and you are working more cohesive as a piece, which is really cool thematically. And I think emphasises that. Yeah. I don't know what you think for the other factions between the two here, but
yeah. I mean, I just think I've gained. So me and Sam did a little game recently where we swapped around armies. So Sam played 100 Kingdoms and I played Spires. And actually, maybe we should do an entire episode on that, because I think that was really fun. I think the thing I did gain an appreciation for was how complex the card ordering step of a Spires list is. And it's just like, I'm just constantly thinking, right, okay, this next thing is going to happen. I want this unit to act after the Ferromancer because I want it to get the boost, but it only gets the buff if I've got 2 of that unit in an army, so that I can have 2 cards underneath. Because you do a thing where if I want to give the unit of Force-Grown Drones, like, I don't know, +1 attacks or something, I think that's an action, but I used it Deadly Blaze or something like that. I think that's a Biomancy, but already I'm confused, right? But like, you have to put that unit at the bottom of your deck. It also has to be in range of the Ferromancer. You then also want, because you've just put a card to the bottom of the deck, you want another Force-Grown Drone card to be there so that it can then act to use the buff you've just given to that unit when you next draw a card. Because if you don't do that, you'll end up being forced to play that card at the end of that unit at the end of the game. So yeah, I think slightly on a tangent here, but yeah, it is a incredibly complex army. And Sam, I'm just amazed that you actually managed to like even finish a game of Conquest in, like within a few hours. So but Jamie, it's been great having you. I mean, we're about to do a few more episodes, so it's going to be great as well. But yeah, if you have got any questions that you'd like to send in,
or complaints,
yeah, we'll forward the complaints to Jamie. That's fine.
I'll take the hit.
Yeah. Then feel free to give us drop us an email at joshingaround. Is it joshing around in air? Yes, that's it. You know what? I got confused because Josh, you read it out once and you said joshing around at air or something, and now probably. I can't get that out of my mind every time I think of it.
I also tried to once send an email and put like the little like allow.
Right, yeah, you put it on there.
Didn't deliver.
Anyway, the email is joshingaroundinair@gmail.com. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.
Thanks for listening.
Later.
Thank you very much.
Hey, joshing around under Ire's bright lights, many battles raging, they're in for the fights. Tiny soldiers stand where their hands roam and rolling the dice, feeling right at home. Oh, Conquest calls, the last argument of kings. They strategize and laugh, it's in the thrill this game brings. Rolling deep, so deep, on the tabletop land, pint glasses clinking in each player's hand. They paint, they plot, it's camaraderie, a fellowship of warlords bound by what they see. Oh, amidst the roar, they find their peace in the heart of air. Their battles never cease. Hey, joshing around, they're ready again. to move their ranks in a world that they pen. Tiny warriors clash on lands they devise. Beneath the ire glow their fantasy flies. With each roll, a story's carved in their tabletop scene. They're the kings of their tales in a world of